Okay, folks, let's get back to our what do you do with winning a revolution? What are you going to do with this place? All right, war's over. Boom. George has resigned. All right, he's done his part. He's like they wanted him to do something, but no, I'm going to go back to my farm. I'm going to be Cincinnatus. Now the trouble is that we've got a lot of struggles in the different states, and all of this is gonna have to be resolved. Basically, we got to remember the country is overwhelmingly democratic. The powers in the assemblies of the different states, and can the assemblies of the different states handle their situations? Yeah, so there's a lot of issues there, and we can talk about them in class. But for the issue of the Articles of Confederation, they, are looking at money. Money is the big issue. This is going to be the Hamilton, the Compromise of 1790, and things like that. Money's always a big issue, right? Now, they've got all that western land, and so that's going to be the sale of that. And so the Northwest Ordinance is going to help with that, okay? The Northwest Ordinance is this amazingly far-sighted, rational, and egalitarian law. What it does is it says that it allows for states to be formed upon the basis of population and come in at an equal footing with the earlier states. Very generous offer that the states, future states, would be equal to the original states. It also sets aside it squares off everything. It's really stupid in that way because the Earth is a globe and squares don't work on globes. But that's the Enlightenment, folks. And but what it does is it takes squares and makes them, some squares are dedicated to the public education, which is very rational, very smart. Get education going in this country because we know we want it and it's going to be important for the republic. And so you have, it's rational, it's egalitarian, far-sighted, it has a plan, and it basically is still in effect because that's how future states still come in. When I was born, there was 48 states. When I die, hopefully later, not too far in the future, I suspect there'll be 51, 52 states. You keep getting states coming in. So that's the Northwest Ordinance. Now, money also is a interstate commerce matter. This is the wedge to create a new government, to actually overthrow the old government and create a new government, overthrow the Articles of Confederation. James Madison, these guys see this. And what is important is this idea of navigation on the Potomac River, because there is this idea that it's the Potomac River that reaches up. Here's the mountains, reaches up into the mountains, the Appalachians, and then the Monongahela River comes down here, and then that reaches the Ohio River. So there's Pittsburgh. And so this connection is where you're going to bring the wealth of the West back to the East, and you're going to put something on the Potomac River. That's also going to be the Compromise of 1790, is to put the Washington, D.C. on that comp. And remember that who is a key owner of property on the Potomac River is Washington. And this is a way to get, and it will be used as a way to get Washington to the meeting, to this thing which is going to turn into a constitutional convention. Okay, so these very sort of, it's a fun story. And there's this young guy, James Madison, who's sort of at the center of it. And Madison graduated from Princeton. He went to a middle colony, Presbyterian, highly respected for a lot of reasons, and is just a very dutiful guy. And so I wrote about him in my essay for you. Now, so one of the things that's going to happen is that the first meeting in Alexandria, which is on the Potomac River, right across from what is now Washington, D.C., fails. And so what they do, the Annapolis meeting failed. What am I talking about? Yeah, to send representatives to a meeting in Annapolis. Okay. Alexandria is the meeting, realizes complexities dealing with the issue. They send them to Annapolis, and then not enough people show up in Annapolis, and so they're going to come up with a new meeting in Philadelphia. And the Continental Congress resolves, you see, to send for the sole purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. The wording here is tricky. Do people know what this wording is opening the door to or not? How many people know what's going on? It's not clearly known. But Madison is using a meeting which is to discuss commerce on the Potomac River to turn it into a constitutional convention. And Madison and Hamilton worked together. Hamilton had come to Annapolis, and they worked together to try and get everybody there. And it's Madison's job to get George Washington there. It's not going to work unless George is there. Okay, as we can see, people smell a rat. They don't like it. Sam Adams and Patrick Henry are two great Democratic demagogues, man. They are people who love democracy, and this is gonna diminish the democracy of the country. The country's very democratic right now. Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, governors, people power. No, they're gonna lose power in this new system. So the smell the rat shows that people know what's going on, and this is it's not a coup in the way we would think of a coup in some super secrecy, but here's the big deal. First day of the meeting in Philadelphia, they vote to be secret. Put George as president, and then we vote. Why does an interstate commerce meeting need to be secret? But this is going to be key to the whole thing, is make this secret, and then the next vote is that they're going to dismiss the idea of doing what they were asked to do. They are commissioned to discuss interstate commerce. Instead, they are going to write a new constitution. They are not going to just revise the articles on especially the commerce issue. So they write the Constitution, and then you got a problem. Big problem. Okay, you are set up as a committee of the Articles of Confederation. So you should, in some sort of grand picture of normal parliamentary procedures, submit your report back to the Congress of the Articles of Confederation. But no, you can't, because you're actually going to, destroy them. So maybe what you should do, because you are, that's a very weak government anyway. This is the legislatures, state legislatures hold all the power. So maybe you should send this all to the state legislatures. Well, no, you can't, because dang it, you lessen the power of the state legislatures. They're not going to vote for it. Well, you could put it up for a popular vote. It's, but no, this diminishes democracy. People aren't going to vote for this thing. So who do you send it to? And this is the great idea of it, is that create ratification conventions, and they are manipulatable. Do it right, and we can manipulate those ratification conventions. Don't make it unanimous. That would be like crazy, because you're not going to get Rhode Island. Different countries are going to be different places are going to be hard. You've got to get the major ones, but don't make it unanimous. So you create this ratification convention thing. Now, the real sort of fun story in this is then, why did people do this? Why did they go with the ratification conventions, and why did they follow all this? Well, largely because it was led by respectable people, largely George Washington. No one thinks George Washington is trying to do something self-centered and bad for the country. So it's basically sort of, we're going to give it a try. And this is why the Federalist Papers are so important, because the Federalist Papers are where Madison, Hamilton primarily, and then John Jay too, tried to explain how this is all going to work. And the issue is like, primarily is democracy. It's like, can we create a national government that diminishes democracy and still have democratic purposes and all that sort of stuff. Federalist 10 is so important because won't we just like fall apart with factions and things like that. So the Federalist Papers, very important to explaining to New York why they should be, and it gets published all around. And so the Federalist Papers join a type of adjunct to the Constitution as to explaining how it will all work. The ratification then stalls on the basis of whether there's a Bill of Rights. And so Madison becomes the guy the go-to guy. Okay, put us together 10 rights. And he doesn't want to be real specific. They're meant to be vague. Madison actually initially doesn't want the Bill of Rights because that would sort of imply the restriction of rights. But he goes on. Now, Madison, at the end of all this, has pretty much the option of doing what he wants. And he chooses to be in the Congress. And the Congress is a good place for him. He feels that he does believe that the Congress has been empowered with great powers. And so, therefore, he is going to be a congressman when this is all over. There's a funny story, and I'll give it to you right now. I got it out of Ketchum's biography of Madison. But George Washington wants to declare, the first State of the Union address, wants to address Congress about where he wants to do things. Well, George doesn't write, and George doesn't really do these sort of speeches and stuff. So he's going to write, it gets to be a written document that's going to get sent over. And so who do you get to write the document? It's James Madison. He's the great, go-to guy for this sort of stuff. So George Washington has James Madison write this first inaugural address, this first sort of State of the Union thing that goes to Congress. Well, Congress receives a letter from the President of the United States, and they feel duty-bound to be formal about this, and so they want to respond to the document and make some, minor, suggestions and stuff like that. And so who does Congress get to write the response to the president? Well, James Madison's the obvious guy to write the response. And so James Madison writes the response to the president. The president wants to respond back. And so the president asks James Madison to write the response back. So here you have the first great, dialogue between the legislature and the president, which is the sort of the forerunner of our State of the Union addresses and stuff like that. And officially it's George Washington to Congress, Congress to George Washington to Congress, when in fact it is in reality James Madison to James Madison to James Madison to James Madison. So there. You see, this is the sort of fun stories that's going on of trying to get our country started.